Winter is the most magical time of the year, twinkling Christmas lights, laughter echoing through the frosty air. But this year, instead of enjoying my tradition of building epic snowmen, I found myself in an all-out war with a self-proclaimed HOA president who doesn't even exist. Enter Karen, a woman who declared herself the neighborhood's leader, sent out fake violation notices, collected bogus HOA fees, and worst of all, hated snowmen. So much so that she destroyed mine in the dead of night, kicking its head off, beating it with a branch, and even melting it with a hairdryer. But when she rammed her SUV straight into my snowman, things truly spiraled out of control. A fake HOA ruling an entire neighborhood through fear? When will the neighbors fight back? And how did Karen's downfall become the most shocking twist of all? Subscribe to Real HOA Drama now and witness the ultimate winter showdown. Winter has always been my favorite time of the year. There's something magical in the air. The twinkling Christmas lights strung along rooftops, the sound of kids laughing as they pelt each other with snowballs, and that strange, sweet sharpness of icy air when you take a deep breath. But to me, winter isn't just about the cold or the holidays, it's about snowmen. Not those lumpy, last-minute ones kids roll together on the lawn, but real works of art. Every year, I dedicate the entire month of December to crafting a masterpiece right in my front yard. One year, I built a life-size Santa Claus, complete with a cotton ball beard and pebble eyes that sparkled in the moonlight. Another year, I sculpted a fierce Viking warrior, complete with a helmet and a wooden axe. It became a neighborhood tradition. Kids would gather to take pictures, neighbors would stop by to compliment my work, and me? I just loved turning snow into something memorable, a special mark of the season. And then, Karen showed up. Karen wasn't the type to appreciate the simple joys of winter. No, she was the kind of person who complained about snow piling up on her driveway like Mother Nature had a personal vendetta against her. The moment Karen moved in, everything in the neighborhood started changing. She declared herself president of the HOA, despite the fact that our neighborhood had never actually had an HOA. And honestly, if all she did was brag about it, it wouldn't have been so bad. But no, Karen wanted control. Within a month, she had sent out fake violation notices to at least 10 households, accusing them of breaking her completely made-up HOA rules. One guy got fined for placing his trash cans incorrectly, even though they were right by the curb like everyone else's. Another family was warned about their non-compliant shutter color, despite the fact that they had painted them that way years ago. And the worst part? Karen started collecting HOA dues. And some of my more gullible neighbors actually paid her, just to avoid the hassle. The first time I heard about this, I nearly choked on my coffee. A fake HOA? In this neighborhood? Who gave her the authority? But I wasn't too worried. I figured people would catch on soon enough. So I kept living my life, kept building my snowmen, and treated Karen like the ridiculous joke she was. Big mistake. What I didn't know was that Karen hated snowmen. Not just disliked them, she saw them as a serious HOA violation. And on one cold, snowy night, my snowman became the first target of Karen's wrath. That morning, I stepped out onto my front yard with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, taking a deep breath to enjoy the crisp winter air. Like every year, I was looking forward to admiring my masterpiece, a nearly 7-foot-tall snowman, wearing a red knit beanie and a striped scarf, standing proudly in the yard as a true symbol of the season. But instead of seeing my pristine, towering creation, I froze in place. My snowman was gone. It hadn't fallen over from the wind. It hadn't melted. It had been completely destroyed. Chunks of snow were scattered across the yard like a crime scene. The head, which should have still been sitting proudly with its cozy beanie, was now lying face down several feet away, as if it had taken a fatal blow. The stick arms were missing entirely, and deep footprints were stamped all around the wreckage. Someone had deliberately demolished it. At first, I thought maybe some rowdy kids had gotten carried away, or maybe a stray deer had stomped through. But then, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. Taped to my front door was a crisp, white piece of paper. HOA violation notice. Dear homeowner, per Section 14b, 7 of the HOA regulations. All outdoor decorations must be pre-approved to maintain the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Your snowman was not on the approved list and has been removed accordingly. Please refrain from reinstalling any unapproved decorations. Sincerely, HOA President, Karen. I laughed, a bitter, disbelieving kind of laugh. The kind you let out when something is so absurd that you can't even be mad right away. First of all, we don't have an HOA. Second, my snowman wasn't bothering anyone. And third, who the hell writes an HOA violation notice about a freaking snowman? I needed proof. I rushed inside, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the security footage from my front door camera. The moment I hit play, I could not believe what I was seeing.
Karen.
In the middle of the night, Karen, wearing a beige bathrobe and massive fuzzy slippers, waddled through the snow, fully prepared for her midnight execution. Scene 1. She drop-kicked my snowman's head like she was taking a penalty shot in the World Cup finals. Scene 2. She ripped out its stick arms, repeatedly beat the snowman's torso with them, then tossed them to the ground like trash. Scene 3. And this is where my jaw hit the floor. Karen pulled a hairdryer out of her bathrobe pocket, plugged it into an outdoor outlet on her porch, and started blasting hot air directly at the snowman like she was trying to erase an enemy from existence. I stared at the screen, completely speechless. This woman had woken up in the middle of the night, stepped out into the freezing cold, and used a hairdryer to take down a snowman. What was I supposed to do with this? Call the cops? Unlikely. File a complaint? With who? There was no real HOA. But there was one thing I knew for sure. Karen just picked a fight with the wrong person. I'm not the kind of person who gets pushed around easily. After watching Karen execute my snowman with a hairdryer, I knew I couldn't just stand by and let it slide. Once? Maybe. But twice? Not a chance. This was now an official war. That afternoon, I rolled up my sleeves and rebuilt my snowman, bigger, better, and stronger. If Karen wanted to destroy it again, I was going to capture every second of her little tantrum. I installed a wide-angle security camera right under my porch, ensuring that if Karen so much as stepped onto my lawn, she'd be starring in the next episode of Neighbors from Hell. And this wasn't just an ordinary snowman anymore. This was a challenge. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, hooded, draped in a red scarf, and sporting a smug half-smile as if to say, "Try me, Karen. I dare you." And, of course, Karen took the bait. 11:53 p.m. A shadow appeared on the camera feed.
Karen.
This time, she wasn't empty-handed. Clutched in her grip was a gleaming metal shovel. The next morning, I replayed the footage, and I could not believe what I was watching. Karen wasn't just knocking over the snowman, she was waging war on it. Step 1. She drove the shovel straight into the snowman's torso, like she was digging a grave. Step 2. She started hacking away at the snow, digging like she was searching for some hidden treasure beneath it. Step 3. After completely leveling the snowman, she went a step further, kicking at the ground to erase any evidence, like some criminal trying to cover their tracks. This wasn't petty vandalism. This was a premeditated takedown. But it didn't end there. The next morning, I stepped outside and froze. They were everywhere: my front door, mailbox, fence, even the damn tree in my yard. HOA violation notices. Not 1. Not 5. Over 10. Final HOA violation warning. The homeowner has continued to disregard the established rules regarding lawn decor despite previous warnings. Failure to comply will result in a $75 per day fine for each day the violation remains. Compliance deadline: 24 hours. Sincerely, HOA President, Karen. I stared at the papers, trying to process the sheer insanity of the situation. First of all, and I cannot stress this enough, there is no HOA. Second, I didn't violate anything. Third, $75 a day for a snowman. This wasn't just a grumpy neighbor. This was psychological warfare. And it wasn't just me. Within days, I started hearing from more neighbors who had had enough of Karen's nonsense. One family got a warning because their Christmas lights were still on after 10 p.m. My elderly neighbor got a fake fine because his garage door was deemed aesthetic non-compliant. A young mom told me that Karen knocked on her door at 7 a.m. just to inform her that her fence was not the right shade compared to the rest of the street. And the worst part? Some people were actually paying the fines. They didn't know it was a scam. Some were new to the neighborhood and didn't want trouble. Others just wanted to be left alone, so they paid up to keep Karen off their backs. I couldn't believe it. At first, I thought this was just about a snowman. But it wasn't. Karen didn't just hate snow, she hated anyone who didn't follow her imaginary rules. And now? She was on a power trip, trying to control an entire community with her fake authority. But me? I wasn't about to let that happen. Game on, Karen. The next morning, I'd had enough. I grabbed the stack of violation notices Karen had plastered all over my house, stuffed them into my jacket pocket, and marched straight to her front door. I was done playing the ignore it and hope it goes away game. If Karen thought she could intimidate me with a bunch of meaningless papers, she was about to learn that she'd messed with the wrong person. Karen lived 2 streets over, in a house so perfect it looked like a real estate brochure come to life. Her white picket fence gleamed with fresh paint, her lawn was trimmed to absolute precision, and of course, right by her front door, there was a massive sign that read, HOA Zone, no violations allowed. Like some kind of warning sign for a military base. I rang the doorbell. The door swung open immediately, as if she'd been waiting for me. Karen stood there in silk pajamas, holding a coffee mug with bold lettering that read, HOA Queen. I had to physically stop myself from laughing. Ah, Ethan, she said, her voice dripping with smugness. I knew you'd come sooner or later. I held up the stack of papers. Yeah, no kidding. Care to explain this garbage? Karen glanced at them, then shrugged like I'd just asked her about the weather. Oh, those are legitimate violation notices. You're in breach of HOA regulations. I blinked. Karen, we don't have an HOA. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, but we do. It was established after you moved in. I folded my arms. Karen, I've lived here for 10 years. I was at the meeting when we voted against forming an HOA. That never changed. She just shrugged, casually blowing on her coffee, like she was savoring her victory. There was a new meeting. You didn't attend, so you didn't get a say. It took me a full 3 seconds to process the sheer insanity of that statement. What meeting? Who voted? Karen waved her hand dismissively. A few of us agreed that the neighborhood needed more structure. And now, I'm in charge. I let out a slow, incredulous laugh. So, let me get this straight. This new HOA of yours now has the power to ban snowmen? She nodded, completely serious. Of course. You can't just pile snow in your yard without approval. It disrupts the neighborhood aesthetic. I stared at her. Karen, it's a snowman. It'll melt in a few weeks. It's still non-compliant. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. So, you actually believe you have the authority to fine me for letting snow exist on my own property? Karen's smirk was so infuriating I almost saw red. That's right. And if you continue to violate the rules, the fines will increase daily. I have the right to collect HOA fees and enforce compliance. I took a step back, looking at her like she'd just declared herself the Queen of England. Then show me the legal paperwork, Karen. Her confidence faltered. I don't need to. I want to see the official legal documents, the registration paperwork, the city records establishing this HOA. If you're running a legitimate organization, then there has to be an approved license from the city, right? Karen's lips pressed together in a thin line. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. But then, like a seasoned con artist, she recovered. I don't have to prove anything to you. You just need to comply. I let out a full, loud laugh. Oh, Karen. You actually think people are going to keep falling for this? She crossed her arms, her face cold. They don't need to believe it. They just need to be afraid of the hassle. And that was when I understood her entire game. Karen didn't need a real HOA. She just needed to act like she had power long enough for people to accept it as truth. If they were scared enough, they'd follow her rules. If they were tired enough, they'd pay her to leave them alone. She wasn't just trying to control the neighborhood. She wanted people to accept her as its absolute ruler. I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled slowly. "Karen, you know what?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "You just made a really stupid mistake." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I took a step back, stuffing the violation notices back into my pocket, and pointed straight at her house. "I'm going to do two things. 1, I'm not taking down my snowman. 2, I'm reporting your little scam to the city." Karen's face stiffened for just a second, but she quickly masked it with her usual arrogance. "Do whatever you want, but you won't win." I smirked. "Oh, Karen, I don't need to win. I just need to make sure you lose." Then I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of Karen's silent rage burning into my back like a winter storm about to break loose. The game was officially on. If Karen wanted a war, I was going to give her one. After this morning's showdown, I realized something. Exposing Karen wasn't enough to make her stop. She wasn't the kind of person who backed down just because the whole neighborhood could see she was a fraud. She didn't need to be right. She just needed to feel in control. But there was one thing she didn't count on. I wasn't backing down either. And I wasn't just rebuilding my snowman, I was taking it to a whole new level. I stopped by the hardware store and bought a large steel drum, sturdy enough to withstand serious impact. Inside, I poured a thick mixture of cement and water, creating a solid, nearly 300-pound concrete core. Once it dried, this wouldn't just be any snowman. This would be a fortress disguised as winter cheer, an unstoppable wall of frozen justice wrapped in an innocent, fluffy exterior. Then, I grabbed a spray bottle and carefully misted the outside of the snowman, letting the water freeze into a slick, icy shell. If Karen tried to shove it, kick it, or take a shovel to it like last time, she was in for a painful surprise. But I wasn't stopping there. This snowman wasn't going anywhere. I drove 3 steel rods deep into the ground, securing them with cement to ensure that no matter how hard she tried, my snowman would stand unshaken. And just to sweeten the deal, I added a few extras inside the snowman, some bricks and large rocks buried within the soft outer snow. Not enough to mess with the structural integrity, but just enough to cause serious regret for anyone stupid enough to ram into it. If Karen wanted to test her luck with her car, well, be my guest. I wasn't going to give her another chance to destroy it unnoticed, either. I upgraded my security system, installing a high-definition, night vision camera with a wide-angle view covering my entire front yard. This time, if she even thought about making a move, I'd have crystal-clear evidence to prove it. After hours of hard work, I stepped back and admired my masterpiece. A towering, flawless snowman, looking completely harmless, yet, in reality, an impenetrable fortress of ice and vengeance. Karen thought she could enforce her fake authority on me? Not a chance. This time, my snowman wasn't falling. And when Karen made her move, she'd be the one to pay the price. I'm not a superstitious person, but that night, something in the air felt different. Like the universe itself was whispering to me that something big was about to go down. I sat back on my couch, a steaming mug of hot cocoa in hand, eyes glued to my phone screen. The live feed from my newly upgraded HD security camera played in crisp clarity. And then, right on cue, like a villain straight out of a low-budget movie, Karen appeared. Karen, in her beige silk pajamas and oversized fluffy slippers, stormed into my yard, wielding a metal shovel like she was about to go into battle. I took a slow sip of my cocoa, folded my arms, and watched her through the screen, amused. She raised the shovel high, aimed straight for the center of the snowman, and swung with all her might. Clang! The sound of metal colliding with solid concrete rang out like a death knell. Karen staggered back, her hands trembling from the sheer force of the impact. Even without the camera zooming in, I could see the pain flash across her face. I smirked. "Your move, Karen." But she wasn't done yet. She tried again. Clang! Even louder this time, echoing through the silent night. The snowman didn't budge. Not even a millimeter. Karen, now visibly fuming, threw the shovel down into the snow, and let out a string of curses very unbecoming of an HOA president. And then, the moment I had been waiting for finally happened. Karen stormed toward her car, a sleek, luxury SUV. I sat up straight, eyes widening.
No.
No way. But then, I saw it. She climbed into the driver's seat. The headlights flashed on. The tires rolled back slightly. And I nearly choked on my cocoa. She was actually going to ram the snowman with her car. Karen pressed the gas pedal. The SUV lurched forward, speeding toward what she thought was just a pile of soft, defenseless snow. But this was no ordinary snowman. Boom. The impact was glorious. Even from inside my house, I could feel the force of the crash. The sound of metal crushing against concrete ripped through the air. The windshield shuddered, the hood crumpled like a soda can, and within seconds, steam began billowing from the mangled front of her car. Something burst under the hood, probably the radiator, sending a plume of vapor into the night like a dramatic final act. And Karen? She stumbled out of the driver's seat, her face a mask of pure horror and disbelief. My snowman? Still standing. Untouched. Unmoved. Not even a scratch. If I could have frozen this moment in time, framed it, and hung it on my wall, I would have. I hit replay on my phone and watched the footage at least 5 times, each time laughing harder than before. The sight of Karen, standing there in front of her wrecked SUV, eyes wide like she'd just seen a ghost, was easily the best scene of the year. I could practically read her thoughts just from the look on her face. Did I just lose a fight to a snowman? I took one last sip of cocoa, stood up, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside. Karen was still frozen in place, staring at her car, probably trying to mentally rewind time and undo her catastrophic mistake. I leaned against my doorframe and called out, my voice dripping with mock concern. Something wrong, Karen? She spun around, eyes blazing with fury. You set a trap. This is illegal. I raised my hands in fake innocence. A trap? Are we talking about the snowman? She gritted her teeth, pointing an accusatory finger at my fortress of ice and justice. You filled it with concrete. I shrugged. I just made a sturdier snowman. Who the hell drives into a snowman and then blames the snowman? Karen looked like she was on the verge of a full meltdown. But before she could sputter out another ridiculous excuse, something even better happened. From down the street, the unmistakable flashing red and blue lights cut through the darkness. The cops had arrived. I grinned wider than I ever had in my life. Karen, your game is over. Karen stood there, fists clenched, steam still rising from the wreckage of her SUV. Her eyes burned with pure, unfiltered rage. She couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that she had just lost a battle to a snowman. She couldn't accept that her own stupidity had turned her luxury vehicle into a mangled heap of metal. So, she did what every Karen does when they lose control. She called the cops. I leaned casually against my doorframe, watching the show unfold with immense satisfaction. Karen yanked her phone from her robe pocket and dialed 911 like her life depended on it. Hello. You need to send the police immediately. Some lunatic in my neighborhood set a dangerous trap on his property. I was attacked. My car has been destroyed. I nearly spit out my cocoa. Attacked. Lady, I built a snowman, not a medieval war fortress. But Karen wasn't done. She kept dramatizing, spinning the situation like she was the victim of some elaborate criminal conspiracy. It wasn't long before 2 squad cars rolled up, their red and blue lights flashing against the snowy backdrop like something straight out of a Hollywood action movie. I glanced at Karen. She looked positively ecstatic. She practically sprinted toward the officers, pointing at me like I was some most wanted fugitive. He set a trap. He built a concrete snowman on purpose to destroy my car. The first cop, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with the deadpan expression of someone who had dealt with way too much nonsense in his life, turned his gaze from Karen to the completely intact snowman, then to the crushed SUV, then back to Karen. His face said it all. Are you kidding me right now? Ma'am, he began, slowly, as if trying to process the sheer stupidity of what he was hearing. Did you just say trap? You mean the snowman? Karen nodded furiously.
Yes.
I ran into it, and he set it up to make me crash. The cop frowned. You ran into it? A flicker of panic flashed across Karen's face. She realized, too late, that she had just admitted to driving onto someone else's property and plowing into a stationary object. I mean, she stammered, it was a hazard. I couldn't avoid it. It damaged my car. I had to physically restrain myself from bursting out laughing. The officer took a deep, exhausted breath, the kind of breath a man takes when he questions every life decision that led him to this moment. Before Karen could dig herself into an even deeper hole, I casually pulled out my phone. Officer, you might want to see this. I tapped play on my security footage, the same footage I had already watched a dozen times for pure entertainment. On screen, Karen, marching into my yard with a shovel, swinging like a lunatic, getting mad, and then, in an act of sheer Karen-level brilliance, throwing her SUV into drive and ramming a snowman like it had personally offended her. And then, of course, the glorious crash. Both officers watched in dead silence. Then, ever so slowly, they turned back to Karen. A single moment of absolute, perfect stillness stretched over the neighborhood. Then, the first cop let out a long, heavy sigh and shook his head. Ma'am, let me get this straight. You drove onto your neighbor's property, into a non-moving object, and now you want to report a crime? Karen's mouth opened, then closed, opened again,
Closed again.
She had nothing, because everything was on tape. After a long, awkward pause, the cop finally made his decision. All right, ma'am. You're being cited for reckless driving and trespassing. Karen's entire world shattered.
What?
But, the trap. The snowman. The officer cut her off. Ma'am, the snowman didn't move. You hit it. Karen clenched her fists so tight, I thought her nails might draw blood. Furthermore, the officer continued, filing a false police report is a serious offense. If we determine you knowingly misrepresented the situation, you could be facing additional fines. Karen's face went through every shade of human emotion, from ghostly white to fire engine red, an unholy mix of rage, humiliation, and absolute defeat. Then, the officer hit her with the final nail in the coffin. So, would you still like to press charges against the snowman? I swear, the air itself held its breath. Karen glared daggers at me. I simply smiled, sipping my cocoa. Oh, Karen, I said, voice dripping with faux innocence. I just built a snowman. Karen snatched the citation from the cop's hand, spun on her heel, and stomped off, her fuzzy slippers thudding angrily against the snow like an irate, oversized goose. I watched her go, taking another victorious sip of my cocoa. Then, in a quiet whisper, just for myself, I muttered, Tonight, Justice wears a red beanie and a striped scarf. And with that, I turned and walked inside, already eagerly awaiting Karen's next move. Because something told me, this wasn't over yet. You'd think that after ramming her own SUV into a snowman, getting slapped with a reckless driving citation, and having the entire neighborhood witness the most humiliating moment of her life, Karen would finally back down.
No.
Because if there's one thing a Karen is incapable of, it's accepting defeat. And so, the next morning, the neighborhood woke up to Karen's latest scam. I rolled out of bed, made myself a hot cup of coffee, and stepped outside to enjoy the crisp winter air, only to find a pristine white envelope taped to my front door. I opened it, and I could not believe my eyes. Urgent HOA notice. Compensation required. Dear residents, per Section 19A of the HOA Guidelines, all homeowners are required to contribute $300 to assist in covering the damages sustained by the HOA President's vehicle, which was unfortunately impacted by a hazardous object in the neighborhood. Payments must be submitted by the 15th of this month. Failure to comply may result in additional penalties. Please submit cash or check to the HOA President, Karen. Sincerely, HOA President, Karen. I had seen some scams in my lifetime, but I had never seen anyone bold enough to send out an official-looking letter demanding cash from an entire neighborhood to fix the car they totaled by driving into a freaking snowman. I actually choked on my coffee when I read the phrase, impacted by a hazardous object. Hazardous object. Was she seriously trying to frame a snowman for vehicular assault? But Karen hadn't just sent this to me. She sent it to everyone. That afternoon, I called for a community meeting in my front yard. And I wasn't the only one furious. Mike, a retired Marine, folded his arms and let out a dry laugh. I've seen a lot of scams in my life, but I have never seen someone try to run a snowman protection racket. Susan, a busy mother of two, raised an eyebrow. Does she actually think we're going to hand-deliver her cash? Mr. Mark, the elderly man from the end of the street who had unfortunately paid one of Karen's fake fines, gripped the letter in his hand and shook his head. Not this time. We're not letting her get away with this. And so, we hatched a plan. No one would pay. We would wait for Karen to come door to door, trying to collect her extortion money. And when she did, we'd all show up at her house. Because it was time for Karen to realize that her little reign of terror was over. Susan had already contacted the local authorities to report Karen's fake HOA scam, and soon, she'd be under official investigation. By the time the sun set, we were ready for battle. That night, Karen made her rounds. Armed with a clipboard and a phony record book, she knocked on doors, waiting to collect her prize. But instead of envelopes full of cash, she was met with cold, amused stares and a series of merciless responses. Oh, Karen, I don't remember us having an HOA. So, have you fixed your car yet? Maybe you should use your own money? How much of this settlement is the snowman getting? Karen's face turned redder and redder with every rejection. And then the grand finale. As Karen finally trudged back toward her house, she froze. Because nearly the entire neighborhood was waiting in her front yard. No one said a word. No one yelled. No one attacked. They just stood there, watching, like they had just witnessed a monster trying to scam an entire community. Mike stepped forward, holding up a white envelope between two fingers. You want your money, Karen? Karen's eyes lit up, but the second she reached for it, Mike ripped it in half. Empty. One by one, everyone else followed suit, tearing up their fake HOA notices and letting the shredded paper fall to the snow like artificial snowflakes. Karen trembled with rage. You can't do this. Susan stepped up next, her voice calm, but sharp as a blade. Oh, but we can. And with that, she held up an official email from City Hall, containing evidence that Karen's HOA was completely fake. Proof that she had illegally attempted to collect money from homeowners. A notice that she was now officially under investigation. Karen's eyes scanned the email, and for the first time ever, her face drained of all color. Karen, I said, my voice cool and sharp, you thought you could con all of us. But this time, you're the one who got played. In that moment, I swear I heard Karen's soul shatter. And I knew this wasn't over. But Karen had just lost the one thing that gave her power. The fear of the neighborhood. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought she could rule the neighborhood through fear, sending out fake violation notices, demanding bogus HOA fees, and bullying people into submission. She believed that the louder she shouted, the more threats she made, the more fake authority she imposed, the more people would fall in line. But there was one thing she didn't account for. Patience has a limit. And when the bullied band together, the bully gets crushed. And finally, that moment arrived. 2 weeks after Karen's failed extortion attempt, the neighborhood woke up to a sight we never thought we'd see. 3 squad cars. 2 government vehicles. 1 tow truck. All parked right in front of Karen's house. She came rushing out, hastily throwing on her fur coat, her eyes wide with panic. What's going on? She screeched, her voice cracking. A city official, a no-nonsense woman with glasses and an air of finality, stepped forward, a thick stack of paperwork in her hands. Ma'am, she said, calm as a judge delivering a verdict, after a thorough investigation into your financial activities, We have confirmed that you have been illegally collecting HOA fees for several years, scamming your neighbors, and failing to report this income to the IRS. Karen's breath hitched. Her face drained of all color. That's not true, this is a mistake. The official flipped open a file and began reading aloud. Total amount of illegally collected funds, $83,000. Unreported taxable income. Misrepresentation of authority. Financial fraud. Karen staggered back, her hands clenched so tightly it looked like she was trying to crush the air itself. I can pay it back. I'll return the money. The woman shrugged, unimpressed. Doesn't matter. The government will handle the restitution. But there's also more bad news for you. She held up another document. Since you've been diverting funds to maintain your fake HOA while failing to keep up with your actual mortgage payments, your house has now been officially foreclosed by the bank. You have 30 minutes to gather your belongings. The entire neighborhood fell silent. For the first time ever, Karen had nothing to say. And if that wasn't humiliating enough, the final blow came just seconds later. While Karen was still stumbling over her own panic, a police officer strolled over to her wrecked SUV, the one she totaled when she tried to take out my indestructible Snowman. He tapped on the cracked windshield and turned to the government official. What about this one? Need it processed too? The woman didn't even hesitate.
Yes.
She still owes on the loan. The bank is repossessing it as well. Karen's head snapped up. And then, right in front of her horrified eyes, she watched as her SUV was hooked up to the tow truck. The engine roared to life. The wheels rolled backward. And just like that, her car was gone. Karen sprinted to the curb, screaming,
No.
That's my car. You can't do this. But the harsh truth was, they could. And they just did. The city officials snapped the file shut and handed Karen a thick yellow envelope. This is your official notice. You no longer own this property. If you return after today, you will be charged with trespassing. Karen shook her head over and over again, her lips moving, but no words came out. This can't be happening. This can't be real. But it was real. Karen, the self-proclaimed HOA president, the woman who bullied, fined, and controlled an entire neighborhood, the woman who tried to scam, intimidate, and manipulate, was now homeless. No house, no car, no power. She had nothing left. Karen was gone. No more fake HOA notices. No more midnight shovel attacks on innocent snowmen. No more bold-faced extortion attempts. But her legacy remained, just not in the way she had hoped. The moment the first snowfall blanketed the neighborhood, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. This year, my snowman wasn't just a work of art. It was a symbol. I built it twice the size of last year's, towering at nearly 10 feet tall, standing proud and undefeated in my front yard. It wore a bright red scarf, flapping in the cold wind like a victory flag. And at its base, firmly planted in the snow, was a large wooden sign with a message that couldn't be clearer. No Karens allowed. But I wasn't done yet. This year, my snowman wouldn't stand alone. This year it had a friend. I spent the entire day crafting a second snowman, right beside it. This one was special. It wore a crown on its head, a beige fur coat, which, purely by coincidence, looked exactly like the one Karen always wore. And at its feet, a smaller sign that read, HOA Queen, the legendary president. The moment my neighbors saw it, they lost it. Mike doubled over laughing, slapping his knee. Ethan, my man, you are a genius. Susan immediately snapped a photo and posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, A new ruler has risen. Anyone remember our old HOA president? Even Mr. Mark, the poor guy who had once been conned into paying Karen's fake HOA fees, laughed so hard he nearly spilled his hot cocoa. A few days later, as the snow kept falling, a crazy idea hit me. Why don't we throw a party? Not a Christmas party. Not a New Year's party. A party to celebrate the downfall of the HOA president. The entire neighborhood got on board instantly. Mike set up a grill in his driveway, cooking up fresh skewers of sizzling meat. Susan brought a giant pot of hot apple cider, made from her grandmother's secret recipe. Kids ran around with massive candy canes, playing in the snow like it was the biggest holiday of the year. And right at the center of the celebration, standing tall and proud, were the two snowmen. One, the unbeatable snowman, a monument to resilience. The other, HOA Queen, the only thing left of Karen's legacy. As I stood there, a steaming cup of cocoa in my hands, watching my neighbors laugh and enjoy their freedom, I realized something. This wasn't just sweet revenge. This was liberation. For the first time in years, our neighborhood was finally free. No more fake rules. No more fabricated fines. No more bullies in power. We had stood up for ourselves. And we had won. As the night ended and the party died down, I took one last look at my masterpiece. The snowmen still stood, untouched. No shovels coming for them in the dead of night. No SUVs trying to take them out. They just stood there. And they had won. I took a slow sip of cocoa, let out a quiet chuckle, and said to myself, you don't have to fight every battle. Sometimes, you just have to outlast your enemy. And with that, I stepped inside, leaving the snowmen to guard the neighborhood in silence. A symbol of resilience. A lesson in justice. And, above all, a reminder that there will always be another Karen out there. But as long as we stand together, Karen will never win.